Welcome to Highness History. True stories from the past that start with irony, spiral into horror, and end in blood, rot, or disgrace. Today's tale: a daughter, a duchess, a scapegoat. Her name was Lucrezia, a tragic retelling of one of history's most infamous reputations. If you love real history served dark, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next descent into beautifully researched disaster. Let's begin. Her Name Was Lucrezia, The Poisoned Reputation, by Kerry Clark. Part 1. The Golden Thread. The brush pulled through her golden tresses with measured strokes, each one tinged with purpose. 100 strokes, as always. Exactly 100, never 99, never 101. Perfection demanded consistency, and Lucrezia Borgia was nothing if not a perfect creation. Outside her window in Ferrara, the crowd's murmurs swelled like an approaching storm. Her name rippled through the gathering masses, like the whispered invocation of a curse. Lucrezia Borgia, Lucrezia Borgia, Lucrezia Borgia. Will that be all, Your Grace? Her handmaiden asked, setting the silver brush down upon the vanity. Lucrezia's reflection stared back at her from the Venetian glass, her face a careful arrangement of serenity. Yes, Julia, that will be all. The door closed with a soft click, and only then did Lucrezia allow her shoulders to sink a fraction of an inch. She wondered which crime they'd pinned on her this time. A fresh poisoning? Another incest rumor? Perhaps a dead husband she didn't know she had. The mysterious death of Ambassador Ricciardetto last week had the stink of intrigue about it. Or maybe it was whispers of incest again. Those never seemed to die, regardless of how many children she bore her husband. Or perhaps she allowed herself a bitter smile. They'd discovered another dead husband she didn't know she had. How many was it now? In the minds of the masses, surely dozens. In reality, only 2. And she had mourned the second with genuine tears that nobody believed. She rose from her seat, the heavy brocade of her dress rustling like autumn leaves as she crossed to the window. From behind the gauzy curtain, she watched the crowd below. She watched them jostle and crane and glare. Peasants, merchants, nobles, all united in their fascination with the Borgia bride. A Borgia bride is always the murder weapon, she whispered to herself, never the one holding it. The irony sliced through her like one of Cesare's fine Spanish daggers. How easily they forgot that weapons don't choose their targets. Weapons don't decide when to strike. Weapons are wielded by hands stronger than their own. She let the curtain fall back into place and turned away. Tonight there would be a banquet to celebrate the birth of her newest child with Alfonso d'Este. She would wear crimson silk and her famous pearl choker. She would smile and make pleasant conversation and pretend she didn't notice when guests refused to drink from the cup she touched. After all, a poisoner's greatest weapon was her reputation, wasn't it? What a pity that reputation was the one thing Lucrezia Borgia had never been permitted to control. Part 2. The Cardinal's Daughter. Rome, 1492. Stand straighter, Lucrezia. A curved spine suggests a curved nature. 13-year-old Lucrezia adjusted her posture until her back ached from the rigid alignment. Her father, Cardinal Rodrigo Borgia, observed her with calculating eyes as he circled her like a hawk assessing its prey. Though not yet Pope, his ambition hung around him like a cloak, and Lucrezia knew her role in his ascension was crucial. Better, he said finally. Now, recite the lineage of the Medici family. The great Cosimo de' Medici had 2 sons, Piero and Giovanni. She began, her voice carefully modulated to be neither too loud, unladylike, nor too soft, unconfident. Piero married Lucrezia Tornabuoni, who gave him Lorenzo the Magnificent and who is Lorenzo married to? Clarice Orsini, of the Roman Orsini family. Good. A rare smile crossed her father's face. And what are the current political alliances of the Orsini? Lucrezia hesitated. She felt a bead of sweat form at her temple, threatening to ruin the perfect arrangement of her hair. They are allied with Naples, but uncertain about France? Cardinal Borgia's smile vanished. Uncertain? The Borgias do not deal in uncertainties, Lucrezia. We deal in facts. Facts and advantages. He sighed heavily. The Orsini are actively courting French favor while maintaining their Neapolitan connection as insurance. This is basic political knowledge that any bride of value would know. I'm sorry, Father. I'll study harder. See that you do. Your brother Cesare can recite the political alignments of every noble family from Barcelona to Constantinople. And yet Cesare is destined for the church, while I am destined for marriage, Lucrezia thought, but did not say. Even at 13, she understood the danger of speaking such thoughts aloud. Instead, she nodded demurely and asked, "Shall I practice my harp now, Father?" "Yes, but first, come here." He beckoned her forward and placed a heavy hand upon her golden head. "You are my most precious jewel, Lucrezia, more valuable than any cardinal's hat or papal tiara. Do you know why? Because I am your daughter." He laughed, the sound echoing against the marble floors of their Roman palace. "No, child, because you are beautiful, and beauty in a woman is currency more powerful than gold. Your face and your name will open doors that even my influence cannot. Remember that." As if she could forget. As if every lesson, every tutor, every mirror in the Borgia household didn't remind her daily that her worth lay in her appearance and her obedience. Later that afternoon, as she practiced her harp in the garden, her small dog Perotto curled at her feet. Her brother Juan swaggered past with a group of young nobles. He paused to ruffle her hair, destroying an hour of her lady-in-waiting's careful work. "Playing the innocent angel again, sister. Father will be pleased." He smirked down at her. "Did you know your dog's collar cost more than the dowry of the baker's daughter who married yesterday? Father commissioned it specially from Florence." Lucrezia glanced down at Perotto, whose jeweled collar glinted in the Roman sunlight. She hadn't known, but she wasn't surprised. Everything about a Borgia must suggest wealth and influence, even their pets. "Perhaps I should marry Perotto off instead," she replied, allowing herself a small rebellion in the form of wit. "He'd make a fine political alliance with the hounds of Naples." Juan's smirk faltered, then reformed. "Careful, sister. Wit in a woman is like poison in a cup, tolerable only in small doses." He sauntered away with his friends, leaving Lucrezia to wonder if that was true of all women, or only of Borgia women, whose words were so carefully monitored they might as well have been prisoners. 3 months later, Rodrigo Borgia became Pope Alexander VI, and Lucrezia's value on the marriage market increased tenfold overnight. The pawn had become a queen, in chess terms only, for in life she remained as powerless as ever, she thought bitterly. Part 3. The First Sacrifice. Rome, 1493. The gold thread in Lucrezia's wedding gown caught the light as she moved, creating the illusion that she was glowing. At the tender age of 13, she was now Lady Sforza, wife to the 27-year-old Count Giovanni Sforza of Pesaro. The wedding feast sprawled through the papal apartments, a display of wasteful opulence that made even the most jaded Roman aristocrats raise their eyebrows. Lucrezia sat beside her new husband, a man she had met only twice before the ceremony. He was neither handsome nor ugly, neither kind nor cruel, at least not yet. He was simply there, another piece on her father's political chessboard. "They say she'll be a widow within the year," whispered a courtier not far from Lucrezia's seat, his voice carrying just enough for her to catch the words. His companion chuckled. "I'd wager 2 years. The Pope won't dispose of Sforza until he's secured the French alliance." "You're assuming poison. I'm betting on a bandit attack while the Count travels." Lucrezia kept her face perfectly still, as if she hadn't heard. As if these casual speculations about her husband's murder weren't being tossed about like suggestions for the next course at dinner. She'd been trained too well to react. Later that night, alone with Giovanni for the first time, Lucrezia discovered that her husband was a man of few words and fewer gentle touches. The consummation was brief, uncomfortable, and mercifully dim in the candlelight. Afterward, as he slept beside her, Lucrezia stared at the ceiling and wondered if she should warn him of what she'd overheard at the feast. But warn him of what, exactly? That her family used people as stepping stones? He was a Sforza. Surely he already knew the game. That her father and brother might want him dead someday? All political marriages came with that risk. That she, Lucrezia, was merely the honey in a trap that might one day snap shut around his neck? That perhaps he didn't know, but it wasn't her place to tell him. Her place was to be beautiful, to be silent, and to be willing, just as she had been raised to be. To her surprise, the courtiers at her wedding were wrong. Giovanni Sforza survived 4 more years, until Pope Alexander decided that an alliance with Naples was more valuable than one with Milan. The marriage must be annulled, Cesare told her one spring morning, striding into her chambers without knocking. Her brother had grown imposing in the years since their father's elevation, trading his cardinal's robes for a military uniform that suited his temperament far better. Lucrezia looked up from her embroidery. On what grounds? Non-consummation. Cesare's smile didn't reach his eyes. You will testify that your marriage was never consummated, that you remain a virgin. The absurdity of it almost made her laugh. After 4 years of marriage, who would believe such a claim? They will believe what we tell them to believe, what the Holy Father commands them to believe. And Giovanni? What will he say to this fiction? Cesare's hand moved to the pommel of his sword, a gesture so casual it might have seemed meaningless to anyone who didn't know him as Lucrezia did. Giovanni Sforza will agree, or Giovanni Sforza will discover that there are worse fates than a blow to his pride. Lucrezia set down her embroidery, her hands suddenly ice-cold. I see. Good! Cesare crossed to her and cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentler than his words had been. My sweet sister, always so obedient. Father was right about you. The perfect Borgia. The perfect weapon, he meant. The perfect decoy. The perfect distraction from the true wielders of Borgia power. When the annulment proceedings began, Lucrezia played her part flawlessly. She testified that her marriage had never been consummated due to Giovanni's impotence. She kept her eyes downcast, her voice soft, the model of maidenly virtue. Giovanni, faced with the choice between admitting impotence or challenging the Pope himself, chose the path that would keep his head attached to his shoulders. But as he left Rome, he spat words that would cling to Lucrezia long after he was gone. She is no virgin. She is the Pope's whore. She is her brother's whore. She is the whore of all Rome. The words spread faster than any plague, seeping into the consciousness of every court in Europe. And though Lucrezia maintained her dignity in public, in private she wept not only for the loss of a husband she barely knew, but for the loss of a reputation she would never recover. Words are just breath, her father told her when she dared to complain. Power is what matters, and thanks to your cooperation, our family's power has increased tenfold. Lucrezia nodded, the perfect daughter once more. But that night, she stared at her reflection and wondered what it would be like to be known for something she had actually done, rather than for crimes she had merely failed to prevent. Part 5. A Taste of Love. Rome, 1498. Alfonso of Aragon was everything Giovanni Sforza wasn't. Young, handsome, and genuinely smitten with his bride. When he kissed Lucrezia's hand upon their first meeting, his eyes lingered on her face with an appreciation that had nothing to do with her family connections. They told me you were beautiful, he said, but they failed to mention that you were kind. Lucrezia blinked, surprised by the observation. We've only just met, Your Highness. How could you possibly know if I'm kind? Alfonso smiled, his Neapolitan charm evident in the ease of his manner. You greeted my squire by name when we arrived. You asked after his family. No one notices servants unless they care about people beyond their usefulness. For the first time in her life, Lucrezia blushed from genuine pleasure at being seen, truly seen, by someone who wasn't a Borgia. Their wedding was less ostentatious than her first, but infinitely more joyful. Lucrezia, now 18, found herself laughing freely during the celebrations, a sound so unfamiliar to her own ears that it almost startled her. Alfonso twirled her in a dance, his hands respectful but warm on her waist, and for one dizzying moment, Lucrezia allowed herself to believe that perhaps this marriage would be different. Perhaps this time, she could be more than a pawn. Perhaps this time, she could be happy. The first months of their marriage passed in a blur of discovery. Alfonso taught her to appreciate the subtle flavors in Neapolitan cuisine. He read poetry to her in the evenings. He treated her as a partner. And in their marriage bed, he showed her that physical love could be gentle, even pleasurable. When she discovered she was with child, Lucrezia felt a joy so pure it frightened her. Good fortune this complete didn't happen to Borgias. At least, not without a price. The price, as it turned out, was steeper than she could have imagined. Naples has turned against us, Cesare announced one summer evening, barging into Lucrezia's chambers where she sat with Alfonso, her growing belly now visible beneath her gown. King Federico supports the French claim to Naples. Alfonso tensed beside her. As the illegitimate son of the former king of Naples, his position was already precarious. My uncle makes his own political decisions. I have no influence over. Save your protestations for someone who might believe them. Cesare's voice was cold, his eyes colder as they raked over Alfonso. The Pope requires your presence tomorrow morning to discuss this development. After Cesare left, Lucrezia turned to her husband, fear tangling like a knot in her chest. You should leave Rome. Tonight. Alfonso shook his head. And go where? If I flee, I only confirm whatever suspicions your brother harbors. Cesare doesn't deal in suspicions. He deals in opportunities. And right now, Naples is an opportunity that doesn't include you. She clutched his hands. Please, Alfonso. I know my family better than you do. But Alfonso, raised with notions of honor that had no place in the Borgia court, refused to run. I've done nothing wrong. I have nothing to fear. On the evening of July 15, 1500, as Alfonso descended the steps of St. Peter's Basilica after his meeting with the Pope, a group of masked men surrounded him. Daggers flashed in the fading light. Blood spilled onto the sacred steps. Lucrezia was in her chambers when the news reached her. Alfonso had been attacked, but was alive, severely wounded. She rushed to his side, 6 months pregnant and heedless of propriety as she pushed past guards and servants. They had moved him to a chamber in the Borgia Tower for safety. Lucrezia barely recognized her husband beneath the blood-stained bandages. She fell to her knees beside his bed, clutching his hand. Who did this? She demanded, though in her heart she already knew. Alfonso's eyes, glazed with pain, focused briefly on her face. Your brother, he managed, before losing consciousness again. For 3 weeks, Lucrezia refused to leave Alfonso's side. She slept in a chair beside his bed. She changed his bandages herself, not trusting anyone else with his care. She prayed constantly, her rosary beads clicking through her fingers like a lifeline. And slowly, miraculously, Alfonso began to improve. His wounds started to heal. He was able to sit up, to take broth, to speak more clearly. Lucrezia allowed herself to hope. That hope died on August 18th when she was called away from Alfonso's bedside to attend to a matter concerning her son from her first marriage. When she returned to the Borgia Tower an hour later, Alfonso was dead, strangled in his bed by Michelotto Carella, Cesare's most loyal assassin. Lucrezia's scream echoed through the Vatican, a sound so raw and primal that servants crossed themselves in fear. She collapsed beside Alfonso's body, her pregnant belly pressed against the edge of the bed where her husband lay lifeless, his neck bearing the unmistakable marks of strangulation. Later, vmush later, when her tears had dried and her voice had gone hoarse from screaming accusations at her father and brother, Lucrezia sat alone in her chambers, Alfonso's signet ring clutched in her palm. The gold dug into her skin as she squeezed it, welcoming the physical pain as a distraction from the hollow agony in her chest. "I didn't know," she whispered to herself. "I didn't know they would kill him." But even as the words left her lips, a bitter voice inside her replied, "You didn't ask either. You never ask. You never want to know for certain what they're capable of." She opened her hand and stared at the ring, at the small ruby that glinted like a drop of blood in the candlelight. Then she slipped it onto her thumb, the only finger large enough to hold it. "I am innocent," she told her reflection in the mirror. The woman who stared back at her, hollow-eyed, pale as death, wearing a dead man's ring, didn't look as if she believed it. The Portrait of a Lady. Rome, 1501. Tilt your chin slightly higher, Your Grace. Yes, perfect. Hold that position. The painter's instructions washed over Lucrezia as she sat motionless on her chair, arranged like a living Madonna with her infant son Rodrigo cradled in her arms. The boy, born after Alfonso's murder, had his father's dark hair and olive complexion. Every time Lucrezia looked at him, she felt the twin pangs of love and grief pierce her anew. The painter, a wizened Florentine with shrewd eyes, worked in silence for the most part, occasionally muttering to himself as he mixed pigments or adjusted his canvas. Lucrezia had commissioned this portrait as a private memorial to Alfonso, though publicly it would be presented as simply a mother and child, with no reference to the murdered father. "They're playing that game again," remarked Lucrezia's lady in waiting, who stood at the window overlooking a small courtyard where a group of children had gathered. "What game?" Lucrezia asked, her head still. "The Borgia bride game, Your Grace. It's popular among the children of Rome." Lucrezia had heard of it but had never witnessed it herself. "Describe it to me." The lady in waiting hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "I don't think—" "Describe it," Lucrezia repeated, her voice steady but brooking no refusal. "Well, Your Grace, one child pretends to be you. The others pretend to be courtiers at a feast. The one playing you offers cups to the others, and they pretend to drink, then clutch their throats and fall down dead." She paused. "It's just children's foolishness, Your Grace." The painter had stopped working, his brush hovering in mid-air as he waited for Lucrezia's reaction. She gave none, at least not outwardly. Her face remained serene, her posture perfect. Only the slight tightening of her arms around baby Rodrigo betrayed any emotion at all. "Continue with the portrait," she instructed the painter, who nodded and resumed his work, visibly relieved. Inside, though, something shifted in Lucrezia, a realization as cold and final as the tomb. Her image, her very name, had been weaponized against her. No matter what she did, no matter how she lived her life, she would always be the Borgia daughter, the poisoner, the woman whose mere touch meant death. The truth, that she had never poisoned anyone, that she had wept for Alfonso until she thought her heart would break, that she treasured her children above all else, would never matter. Reality could not compete with the power of rumor, especially when that rumor served the interests of so many. When the portrait was finished weeks later, Lucrezia stared at the image the painter had created. A Madonna-like figure, serene and pure, cradling her child with tender devotion. The irony nearly made her laugh. The woman in the portrait was a fiction, as invented as the poisoner of popular legend. Neither was the true Lucrezia Borgia, and neither ever could be. The real Lucrezia existed somewhere in between, a woman who had learned to survive by bending but never quite breaking, by seeing but pretending blindness, by knowing but feigning ignorance. That autumn, her son Rodrigo was taken from her to be raised at the Neapolitan court, a political move designed to placate Alfonso's family. Lucrezia begged her father to reconsider, to allow her to keep her last connection to Alfonso. The boy will have a better life in Naples, Pope Alexander insisted. He will be raised as a true Aragonese prince away from. He paused, seemingly searching for the right words. Away from the Borgia taint? Lucrezia finished for him, her voice as sharp as shattered glass. Her father had the grace to look momentarily abashed. That is not what I was going to say. But it is what you meant. Lucrezia turned away, her grief for Alfonso still raw, now compounded by the loss of her son. Sometimes I wonder, Father, if you regret making me a Borgia at all, given how often you try to distance me from our family's reputation. Nonsense. You are my beloved daughter. Everything I have done has been for the advancement of our family. No, Lucrezia said softly. Everything you have done has been for the advancement of the Borgia men. The Borgia women are merely the currency you spend to achieve it. It was the most direct challenge she had ever issued to her father, and for a moment, Pope Alexander VI, the most powerful man in Christendom, seemed taken aback. Then his expression hardened. You will marry again, he announced. Alfonso d'Este, the heir to Ferrara. The negotiations are already underway. Lucrezia felt the last piece of her heart turn to stone. As you wish, Holy Father, as always. Part 6. The Duchess of Ferrara. Ferrara, 1502. Ferrara greeted its new duchess with elaborate ceremony and private disdain. The ancient and proud Este family had not wanted a Borgia bride for their heir, but Pope Alexander's offer of a massive dowry and significant political concessions had proven too tempting to refuse. Lucrezia's arrival procession stretched for miles, her entourage including 100 Moorish slaves, troops of entertainers, and carts laden with gold plate, tapestries, and jewels. The Pope had ensured that his daughter would enter Ferrara as the wealthiest bride the city had ever seen, rather than a notorious Borgia. Alfonso d'Este, her third husband, was a man of science and war, serious, dedicated to his artillery foundry, and initially cold toward his new wife. The people of Ferrara, following their duke's example, viewed Lucrezia with suspicion and fear. They think I carry poison in my rings, Lucrezia remarked to her lady, in waiting after a particularly frosty reception at court. Did you notice how the Countess Rangoni refused to accept the sweetmeats from my hand? She waited until the tray had been offered to 3 other ladies before taking one. The Ferrarese will learn, Your Grace, with time. Lucrezia smiled thinly. Yes, they will learn, but not what they expect to learn. Over the coming months, Lucrezia embarked on a careful campaign to remake herself in Ferrara. She attended to the poor, establishing hospitals and orphanages throughout the duchy. She became a patron of artists and poets, filling the austere Este court with music and literature. She practiced absolute discretion in political matters, deferring always to her husband and father-in-law. And slowly, imperceptibly, the ice began to thaw. Alfonso d'Este, initially so distant, found himself drawn to his wife's intelligence and grace. The court ladies who had once shunned her began to seek her company. The common people who had feared the poisoner of Rome came to love the angel of Ferrara. By 1505, Lucrezia had given birth to her first Este child, a daughter, and had firmly established herself as a respected duchess. When news arrived of Pope Alexander's death, followed shortly by her brother Cesare's fall from power, Lucrezia showed no public distress. She had learned the most valuable lesson of survival adaptation. Yet, despite her transformation, the rumors never fully died. Visitors to Ferrara still asked servants if the Duchess kept poisons in her chambers. Foreign diplomats still made veiled references to her interesting family background. Anonymous pamphlets still circulated, depicting her in obscene embraces with her father and brother. "Why does it persist?" she asked Alfonso one night, years into their marriage. They had developed, if not a passionate love, then a genuine partnership based on mutual respect and shared duty to Ferrara. I have given them nothing to fuel these stories. I have lived like a saint for 10 years. Alfonso set aside the artillery designs he had been studying and regarded his wife thoughtfully. Saints and sinners both make compelling stories, Lucrezia. The world has already cast you as the latter. They do not easily rewrite a narrative once it has taken root. So I am to be forever judged for crimes I did not commit? For a nature I do not possess? You are to be forever remembered, Alfonso corrected her. Few women achieve that distinction, regardless of the reason. It was cold comfort, but it was the truth. And after years of Borgia lies, Lucrezia had developed a taste for truth, however bitter. Between 1,505 and 1,519, Lucrezia bore Alfonso 7 more children, oversaw the education of humanist scholars in Ferrara, and managed the duchy during her husband's frequent military campaigns. She corresponded with some of the greatest minds of the Renaissance, and maintained a court renowned for its cultural refinements. Yet still, the whispers followed her. Still, the Borgia name clung to her like a shroud. Still, children played their deadly games in the streets, pretending to be poisoned by the beautiful Duchess. Part 7. The Saint No One Believes. Ferrara, 1,518. Push, Your Grace, the child is almost here. Sweat plastered Lucrezia's golden hair to her forehead as she gripped the birthing ropes and bore down with all her remaining strength. At 38, this pregnancy, her 8th with Alfonso, had been her most difficult yet. For weeks, she had been confined to her bed, bleeding intermittently, her body rebelling against the familiar burden. The midwife's face betrayed her concern, even as she offered encouragement. "Once more, Your Grace, with all your might." Lucrezia gathered her waning strength and pushed, a groan escaping her lips despite her determination to maintain dignity even in childbirth. Her vision swam with black spots, but through them she saw the midwife lift a tiny, bloody form. "A girl, Your Grace, small, but breathing." Relief flooded Lucrezia, followed immediately by a wave of pain so intense that she cried out. The midwives exchanged alarmed glances as fresh blood soaked the birthing sheets. "Send for the physician," the head midwife ordered a servant, "and summon the Duke, quickly." In the haze of pain that followed, Lucrezia drifted in and out of consciousness. She heard urgent voices, felt hands pressing on her abdomen, sensed the burning taste of some herbal concoction being spooned between her lips. Through it all, one thought remained clear. "I'm dying, just as my mother did. In childbirth, the most ordinary death for an extraordinary life." Alfonso arrived, his usually composed face tight with worry. He knelt beside her bed and took her hand, his calloused palm warm against her increasingly cold fingers. "The baby?" Lucrezia whispered. "She lives. We've named her Isabella, as you wished." A small smile touched Lucrezia's pale lips. "Good. She will need strength. A queen's name for a duke's daughter." Alfonso's grip on her hand tightened. "Save your strength, Lucrezia. The physician believes you may yet recover." But Lucrezia knew better. She could feel her life ebbing away with each heartbeat, with each pulse of blood that her body could ill afford to lose. She had seen enough death in her 39 years to recognize its approach. "I need to make my confession," she murmured. A priest was summoned. He wasn't the family confessor who knew all her petty sins, but a Dominican friar known for his severity and unwavering adherence to church doctrine. A man who would not be swayed by her position or her beauty. When they were alone, the friar bent close to hear her whispered words. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It has been 1 month since my last confession." The friar nodded encouragingly, waiting for the recitation of moral failings that accompanied most deathbed confessions. "I have been vain," Lucrezia began. "I have taken pleasure in fine garments and jewels when the poor of Ferrara lack bread." The friar's expression suggested that this was a disappointingly mundane sin for the notorious Duchess of Ferrara. "I have been prideful, believing myself more capable in matters of state than some of my husband's advisers. I have felt anger toward those who slander me. I have envied women whose reputations remain unstained." She paused, gathering her remaining strength. "But, Father, I have never poisoned anyone. I have never committed incest. I have never ordered a murder or rejoiced in a death. The worst of what they say about me, about the Borgias, is not true. Not for me." The friar regarded her with skepticism so palpable, it felt like another pain in her failing body. "You need not fear the judgment of man now, Duchess. Only God's judgment awaits you. That is precisely why I speak the truth, Father. God already knows it. I merely wish for one other soul on earth to know it too, before I die." Whether the friar believed her or not, Lucrezia would never know. He granted her absolution with the proper words. Whether he believed her, Lucrezia would never know. He departed to allow her family to say their goodbyes. Alfonso returned to her side, bringing their children, the ones old enough to understand what was happening. Lucrezia blessed each one, her voice growing fainter with each benediction. When they had gone, Alfonso remained, his face uncharacteristically open in its grief. "I misjudged you when we wed," he said simply. "I thought I was marrying a serpent. Instead, I found a woman of remarkable fortitude and grace." "Did you ever believe them? The stories?" Lucrezia asked, needing to know before the end. Alfonso considered the question with the honesty that had become the foundation of their marriage. "At first, yes, but not for long. No one who lived with you daily could believe such tales." A tear slipped down Lucrezia's cheek. For the decades she had spent her life trying to outrun a shadow that moved faster than she ever could. "Our children," she whispered. "Make sure they know the truth of me, not the legend." "I solemnly promise," Alfonso replied, pressing her fingers to his lips in a rare gesture of tenderness. Lucrezia Borgia died on June 24, 1519, 10 days after giving birth to her daughter Isabella. She was buried in the convent of Corpus Domini in Ferrara, dressed in the habit of a tertiary Franciscan, with rosary beads wrapped around her clasped hands. Part 8. The Eternal Reputation. At Lucrezia's funeral, the banners displayed her titles: Duchess of Ferrara, Countess of Pesaro, Lady of Bissigli, Patroness of Arts and Letters, Mother of 8. But in the taverns of Rome, in the courts of Europe, in the whispers that would echo through centuries to come, she carried other titles: poisoner, whore, murderess, Borgia. Alfonso d'Este kept his promise to his wife. He raised their children with stories of their mother's kindness, her intelligence, her devotion to Ferrara. He commissioned works that portrayed her as the virtuous duchess she had strived to be. Yet against the tide of legend, these small truths were just pebbles thrown into the ocean, momentarily disrupting the surface before being swallowed by the depths. Historians would debate her guilt or innocence for centuries. Artists would depict her as angel or demon according to the fashion of their time. Her name would become synonymous with beautiful, deadly women who used seduction as a weapon. The truth, that Lucrezia Borgia was likely innocent of any murder, that she was a pawn rather than a player in the Borgia ambitions, that she found redemption in Ferrara, would be acknowledged but never quite believed. In death, as in life, Lucrezia Borgia remained trapped between the woman she was and the legend she could never escape. She spent her life trying to outrun a lie. But lies don't die. They get canonized. Lucrezia Borgia died in childbirth at 39, remembered not for what she did, but for what she was blamed for. If you were haunted, horrified, or oddly moved by this episode, hit like, drop a comment with your favorite moment. Subscribe for more true stories where the real monster is almost always a man or woman is in a robe, or a wig, or both. And if you want the full heinous history experience, check the description for the ebook and audiobook links, plus behind-the-scenes notes from our historical hit squad. Until next time, remember, lies don't die. They get canonized. Historical side effects disclaimer. Lucrezia Borgia edition. This story is for entertainment purposes only. No popes, cardinals, or noblemen were poisoned during the writing of this tale. Allegedly. Side effects may include heightened paranoia at dinner parties, suspicion of anyone wearing a pearl choker, unsolicited marriage proposals from powerful but doomed men, and the uncontrollable urge to say, I'm not a poisoner, but I could be. Do not engage in Borgia politics if you are allergic to betrayal, delicate reputations, or being weaponized for diplomacy. Prolonged exposure to Renaissance Rome may result in historical whiplash, papal corruption fatigue, and existential dread disguised as embroidery. Not safe for members of the Sforza, Aragon, or Este families. May lead to chronic widowhood, recurring identity crises, and the permanent mislabeling of your entire legacy. If symptoms of reputational ruin persist, try leaving Italy, or faking your own sainthood. Use with caution. Contents may be more innocent than they appear, or not.